everyone. Welcome to another episode of
You're Not Crazy.
All right. So just to kind of keep us going on track.
You gotta introduce yourself.
Yes.
Who are you?
Yes, who am I? My name is Jaspreet Rai. I am a licensed psychologist.
My name's Carrie Smith. I'm a licensed clinical social worker.
All right. And just as you might remember from our previous episodes, just want to remind all of you. So our channel does not, anything that we discuss does not replace therapy services, which means?
Yeah. So if you need professional help, please reach out and find some professional help. We're just here to give some quick tips on how to manage a variety of mental health concerns. If you feel like you're in crisis and you're having a psychiatric emergency, please call 911, go to the nearest emergency department. You can also utilize some suicide hotlines. 988 is a suicide hotline that you can always call. So please reach out for help if you feel like you're in crisis.
Yes,
Let's
thank you. Yes, and then as you might remember, we have been focusing on anxieties. So today we're going to look at untwisting those negative thoughts and what that means for us a little bit. And then in the previous episodes, we did discuss negative cognitive distortions, a little bit of what that looks like. So we're going to do a little bit of refresher and then we'll dive in.
All right. So today, as Jaspreet was saying, we're going to focus on untwisting our negative thoughts. So remember, we call those ANTS, automatic negative thoughts. So we're going to look at step by step, how do we take these automatic negative thoughts and untwist them to become more useful, realistic, helpful, believable thoughts. So step one, identify the thought. Label it as negative and label it as an unhelpful thought. This is really important because if we don't put a label to it that is realistic and that's useful, it's going to be difficult for us to untwist it. So we're going to label it as a negative thought and then write it down. For the sake of these exercises today, it's important to have a pencil and paper to write it down.
Okay.
Step two.
Yeah, so step two is asking about this thought. So getting curious, right? But in a non-judgmental way. So not going into it and already kind of having labeling as a good or bad. Just sometimes we might not even know how to label it. So sitting there and kind of really focusing on, okay, what does this mean, and asking about what is the thought that's attached to it. That's really important because then we can figure out where are the triggers coming from, what is causing this thought and feeling. So that's the next step.
And part of this step, we want to get curious and non-judgmental. So when you're asking questions about this thought, we want to be curious, we want to be kind, respectful, and not non-judgmental. So we don't want to ask things like, what's wrong with me, right? That's judgmental. We want to ask things like, what are the advantages or disadvantages of having this thought? How is this thought helping me? How is this thought useful? Is this true? Is this really true? Do I have evidence? So those are some questions that you might want to ask yourself. You might also want to ask yourself things like, am I making this really big? Is this actually what's happening, right? So be curious, be kind, be respectful, be non-judgmental. So that's all part of step two. And then step three, we're going to go back to identifying our feeling. And remember, a feeling is one word, maybe two, but usually just one word. And separate that from the thought. So the thought is two or more words. Usually it's a sentence or like a whole book. And then the feeling is one word. So we're going to identify those two things. And then step four.
All right. So the next step four is the viewing the negative thought, right? With a new, so really allowing yourself with a non-judgmental perspective of a new, realistic, rational, useful thought, right? So really, is it, okay, I have this perception, but is it realistic? Is it rational? Is it useful? So again, like Carrie said, writing these down and then following through with each step of, is it a new thought? Realistic, rational, useful, right? And then just really backtracking a little bit to the non-judgmental, that also not applies to us but others and vice versa, because sometimes we do get like, oh, that person's a certain way, would they do that otherwise, really? So in this process to work, you really have to be non-judgmental and neutral for everyone that these emotions and feelings are attached to.
Yep. And so we're going to show you a visual here. And in this visual, it gives you an example of how you might be able to write this on paper, right? It doesn't have to be this way, but this is just an example. So on the one side here where it says negative thought, you're going to write that thought and then go ahead and put at the bottom the feelings, right? Remember, feelings are like one word. In the middle part, you're going to write down your questions. Is this helpful? Is this useful? Do I have evidence? What are the benefits of having this thought? Are there pros and cons of having this thought? Is it really useful? And then on the right-hand side, you're going to start trying to challenge this thought with something that's useful, helpful, realistic, kind, non-judgmental. So let's go through an example of how we might do this with an actual thought. So if our thought was, I'm going to fail at everything in life. And some of us have had maybe this exact thought, maybe something similar, right? I'm going to fail at this, or I'm going to fail at that. Step 2 would be, is this helpful? And we're going to write it down, and we're going to ask ourselves, what is my evidence? Okay. Can I really predict the future? What are the advantages or disadvantages of having this thought? We're going to ask ourselves that question. And then step 3, we're going to identify the feelings. So those feelings might be useless, sad, angry, scared, worried, anxious. There may be a lot of feelings, but remember, those are one word. Step 4 is going to be to challenge this thought. So an example of a challenge thought might be, I might fail at some things, but I might have successes. And if I look back historically, there are some things I don't do well at and some things I do well with. So the reality is we can't predict the future, right? So that's another useful thought. So that would be an example of how to do this.
Yeah. And I think too, as you're going through all this process, one of the biggest things is really sometimes, I know we had talked about one of the distortions is the what ifs, right? And then really going along with that scenario of whether it's a positive or negative thought, right? Challenging that, but if it is positive, okay, what if? And then also if you want to kind of, again, being neutral, we want to do both sides, looking at it, okay, if it does turn out to be a negative or it doesn't work out as well as we would like it to, then okay, what if? And at the end of the day, when we follow through those steps, we realize the worst case scenario, we're still okay with it, right? We're still okay with it. So it's the matter of just kind of walking through and visualizing ourselves doing that and following that process in a non-judgmental, neutral, respectful way.
Awesome. I think that's it for today.
Yes, thank you for watching.
Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next week. Same place. You're not crazy. Remember that.
Yeah,
and again, if you
crazy.
feel like you're having a psychiatric or a medical emergency, please call 911. Go to an emergency room. Call a suicide hotline. You can always use 988.
All right, thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye-bye.